And now we're joined with, I'll admit, one of my favorite people in water polo, the Hall of Famer, the Olympic champ, Brenda Villa, now of the Stanford Cardinal. B, how are you?
I'm great. New adventures gets your mind working.
Yeah, you just coming on board with your alma mater, Stanford, to join the staff there with JT and Susan. I know you have a lot of love for Stanford, but you were in a great place too with Olu. How tough was that transition for you?
um, I would say really hard because you make connections, right? One of the great things about our sport is it's still small enough where you know a lot of people. So just being able to build a great community at Olu, I think that's what was the hardest piece. But knowing that if I wanted to continue to get better at my trade, that to pass up an opportunity like learning from two of the best college coaches out there was hard to do. So I didn't.
Yeah, that's a hard job to pass up on. You join a program that, as you well know, you've been involved kind of on the other side as a broadcaster the last few years. This
hmm
is one of the destinations for women's water polo. When you think back to when you signed on to play at Stanford to where it is now, how has it grown from it being one of the spots people want to be at for water polo and academics?
Yeah, I think that back in my day, um, it wasn't the destination quite yet. I think there were some other powerhouses, or I think it was also the path to Stanford wasn't as clear. Um, if you see the trajectory of just college recruiting, right? There's more junior days now, and there's different things that colleges have put in place to make sure that they find the athletes that better fit their schools. So I feel like Stanford has done a great job in doing that. I think when JT and Susan came on, it took them a little bit to kind of figure out what that path was, but it's great to sit on this side of it now, right? And benefit from the great foundational work they've done in lining up what the recruiting process is here.
You've been on teams as a player where it's running well and maybe some new players come on board, but it's like we have the same mission. And so I wonder now as a coach, like this thing's running on all cylinders. How do you try to add to it while also, keeping in line with what they've been working on for a long time now?
Yeah, I catch myself right now processing a lot. And if you know me, I'm a very vocal person and share my thoughts without reserve. But in the moment right now, I'm taking a step back in the sense where I want whatever I contribute, I want it to be under whatever their new system is, right? Like they've evolved from the time that I was here. There's some foundational stuff that is the same. It's bigger than water polo, it's bigger than Stanford. Like, how are we, making a positive impact in this world? But yeah, so for now I'm just taking a step back, but each day I'm on the pool deck, it's just like getting back on a bicycle, and it's been really fun and exhilarating to get back into the groove with the Stanford way of playing.
It's interesting. I thought of you just a couple of days ago. I was talking to the Notre Dame women's volleyball coach, Shalima Rockwell. She was a great player, became an analyst, was one of the top analysts on TV, and then took on a head coaching job with Notre Dame. And that transition from watching all the teams to now focusing on your team. I'm curious. You've had the chance to look at all the teams. What's it been like now to really zero in on Stanford and kind of your hopes and dreams for one team as opposed to being an observer of the whole game?
Yeah, it's fun, right? Like you think about the pieces and the puzzle that you're trying to create and noticing players more because it's like a singular focus, right?
Mm.
So a few players that have been on my radar through watching games, but now I see them more often. I'm like, wow, they're really talented. And then now with like Jewel and Ryan gone and just a different makeup of teams, now it's like, oh, that athlete who's spectacular, maybe you'll get a couple more minutes and you'll see them shine. So it is nice to get to know one group more and see them in different environments where we are putting them under pressure to see if they could perform. So it's been fun to be able to get to know some players at a deeper level.
Women's season will be here before we know it. Of course, some off-season competitions coming up. Last question for you about Stanford. I always think about your journey to Stanford, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were the first person from your high school to go to Stanford. Is that true?
Yes, I believe that's true. I mean, that's what I was told, so we'll
Yeah.
go with that. Yes.
We're going to go with that. Obviously, there's no shortage of interests from water polo athletes to come to Stanford, but recruiting is certainly part of your job. How much do you think about finding the next you or someone that Stanford was not in their stratosphere because they just didn't think it was possible or didn't know about it, or maybe I think you're right, you were the first in your family to go to college, like those sorts of people overcoming those things, even though a lot of time has passed. Like, do you think about the next Brenda?
I, I do. I always do, right? If you think about the work I do outside of um, water polo, in the sense we're like trying to make water polo and aquatics more accessible to all. Um, I've had great conversations with JT and Susan just about what they look for, what the fit is, right? And we all have different um we see different talent, different we have different lenses into what a
Sure.
talented player could be. So I'm looking forward to be able to bring that lens and hopefully find a Brenda, right? Or somebody that has, as I've been told, good water polo IQ, maybe doesn't fit the mold, but has just, this spark in them that just can't be taught. So yes, I hope to find that out there.
Now, if talking about high school didn't make you feel old, we'll talk about the 2000 Olympics 25 years ago this fall. Uh, when Sydney comes to mind all these years later, we know the results, of course, but what pops into your head right away when you think Sydney 2000?
Oh man, I think about that Australian cheer. Aussie, 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 oi, oi. No, but in all seriousness, I think about being in high school and not being able to dream about, like, at the beginning of my high school career, not being able to have the Olympics as a goal or as a dream, right? And then till my senior year when it was put into the program, and just how now girls are growing up being able to dream about that even at 10 and unders, right? So um just the landscape in that is different, and I think it's awesome. And then I think about, when I think about Sydney, I think about um that's where the dream of becoming like an Olympic champion was born. Like, we didn't win that time, and we all thought we would be successful, but I don't think anybody else in the world thought we would be as successful as we were in Sydney. I think about being the first team ever on a podium for Team USA. Um, and of course my teammates. I think about all the pictures and the cheers and the highs and the lows. But yeah, a lot of great memories.
There was a lot of talk at the Paris final last summer about the size of the crowd, and initially some reports that was the biggest crowd ever. And I know people like you were saying, "Well, hang on, I played in front of the biggest crowd ever." What do you remember about? Was it 17 or 18,000? It was a massive crowd in Sydney. What do you remember about that scene and that vibe?
I definitely remember taking a moment in lineups and just like looking up in the stands and appreciating it. And of course, I always would try to find my parents. And in most pool venues, you could find them because it's not that big, right? But there was no way that I could find them. So just taking that in, and also just, we always talked about listening for the silence. And of course, when you're playing the home team, in the first Olympic final ever for women's water polo, um, we needed to listen for the silence because there was probably only 200 Americans there cheering, or people cheering for the US, and the rest were cheering for Australia. But it was incredible. I mean, especially the way the pool was set up, right? It was only really on one side that you had all the cheering section. So there was definitely nosebleeds seating. So it was pretty incredible. It was loud. It was anything that any young 10 and under could dream of.
Anyone that follows the team now and has seen all of their success, It's like, of course they won silver. They're always on the podium. They medal all the time. Of course, Paris was a heartbreak. But can you give some context to the expectations? This was not a top ranked team going into Sydney. You had to battle through the qualifier. The medal was not a given.
No, and I think back to a conversation, a team meeting that we had with Guy Baker. I think when he first came on to coach the team, and I think he had taken stats about our record versus like Holland, Australia, um, who else were the top teams back then? Maybe like Italy, Hungary, and
Mhm.
like our record against Holland was like 1 in, I don't know, 15 in the last, 3 or 4 years prior to him taking the job. So he was like, of course you don't know what that feels at like yet, right? So just the preparation that went in before Sydney to put us in the position to know that we could be successful in that, and it wasn't something that was so out of this world for it to happen. And then if you think about it, we opened up with Holland, we beat Holland, and then we beat them in the semi. And they, I would say, were the team of the 90s, right? So they incredibly talented. So to be able to do that and do it twice at the Olympics, I think gave us the confidence that we needed. But even if you think back to that, then we tied Canada when like the last 10 seconds of a game, we were down, so we go from beating one of the top teams to then almost losing to Canada, and that tie gave us the point needed to be fourth, I believe, or something. So that, however, the bracket played out. So it was such a huge like point for us to advance, but yeah, we just had just started to really beat these teams. And I go back to like the qualifier, like beating Hungary in Europe to qualify. Like these were big milestones for the team. So I think for us, we were coming off that positive wave of like, we can do this, we can battle with everyone. So we believed because we had been able to kind of turn that wave in our favor.
Yeah, just an amazing journey there. And in the grand scheme of women's water polo, there were positive things happening, right? NCAA would come online as a season later, right, in 2001. But if you think about those 2000 games, how much did that kind of set the table for all the amazing things that happened, especially with the U.S. women over the last 20 plus years?
I think it was like a ripple effect, right? I think about playing in my first, coming back from Sydney, and then playing in my first collegiate season after an Olympics. It was the first time ever NCAA sponsored it. And USC had Aniko Pele, Sophia Canuck, like some of the best players in the world coming to the US to play. So you think about that, just encouraged more players to come, right? So now we were a legitimate player in the world where we're producing our athletes from the NCAA system. So I think it was just like, here are the Olympics, here are the Americans that, have talent. We're okay with our talent going over there to make their leagues better. They probably don't think of it that way, but I think for us, we did benefit. So I think all of that just started coming along, like more high school programs, more club teams, more younger girls playing, and it just has continued.
It would take another 12 years before that ultimate prize came for you in London. You're shaking your head now, right? Who knew? When you're leading into those games, and when the gold finally happens, right? And you have all these other great experiences in world championships. When you finally get that ultimate prize, I kind of remember you saying after that, like, I haven't even cried yet because just
Mm-mm.
so many other thoughts to it. When you think back on that now, and like where you started in Sydney and then finally getting there at the end, what comes to mind when you think about that kind of span of time?
I really think about the opportunities we had to like fortify our our bond and connections with the team, like in and out of the water. If you think about Sydney, we really had 2 years to train and get on the same page, and we were able to do what we did. And then after that, you had more opportunities, but just, I don't know. I don't think that I always believed that you needed to like love and respect your teammates to a certain degree, right? To like make it happen. And as I got older, I it's something where you do. I don't know. I feel like my mindset was, I don't have to like you. I just respect you in the water, and if you're
Mhm.
open, I'm going to give you the ball, right?
Yeah.
And you just play because we have a common goal. But as I got older, just knowing that that person next to me has seen me at my lowest and could help me get out of it, and just that support. I think all those moments helped us get over the hump in 2012. And I think it just put us in a place where whatever that outcome was, I was going to be happy because I had left it all on the table, and so did all my teammates, and I did everything in my power to make it um the best that we could make it, whatever the result was. But it worked out for us, so I'm okay with that.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting to kind of hear your perspective on growth from your early days to kind of being in like a veteran spot. Last thing on Sydney, I'll kind of tie it back to Stanford. One of the people you play with, Heather Petrie, you're now wearing opposing colors once again. You're with Stanford, she's with Cal. What's that first meeting between Cal and Stanford going to be like next season when you're on opposing benches?
I mean, there will be a hug before the game and after the game, if you know PD. But the interesting thing is, like, we are. I think Adam has said this, like, you guys are such great friends. Like, who would have known? And I'm like, when you spend all those years together fighting for one thing, like, of course there is this, like, no one else in the world knows what we went through, right? Like, we were there that whole journey together. So of course she was one of the first people that I talked about this opportunity, and she was like, you have to do this. So, like, till the end, like, to have the sisterhood of support, will always be there. Of course, we're both competitive, and of course, we have, like, our biases of, like, our alma maters, and we'll jockey back and forth. But I wish her the best. She wishes me the best, and it's all about how do we make this sport continue to grow and be better for everyone else.
Yeah, that's spot on. When you said sisterhood, I thought of bond, like the definition of bond. When you think about everything you two have worked for and worked on and accomplished together, it's always going to be like Brenda and Petey. I think people just think of you guys together, and that's a great thing. So,
Yeah.
B, thank you for the time. Congrats again on the new role at Stanford. We will miss you on the NCAA championship broadcast, but we're looking forward to seeing you by the pool here real soon.
Thank you.